According to a 2018 data study from the NAEP, or National Assessment of Educational Progress, U.S. children's geography knowledge is low, with only 25% of 8th grade students scoring at or above proficient, and 3 out of 4 students performing below proficient. What's more, the 2018 study showed that average scores had dipped since 2014, and overall 8th grade geography knowledge proficiency had not significantly statistically improved since 1994. Perhaps it makes sense that scores have been on the decline since '94, as arguably one of the high points of kids' geography knowledge may have come a year earlier, in 1993, when the hit WB animated series Animaniacs featured 2 popular geography-based songs, Yakko's World, which listed all the countries in the world, and Wacko's America, which listed the 50 states and their capitals. Thanks to these songs, at least one generation of American children were at least somewhat more knowledgeable about geography. But Animaniacs wasn't even the first WB cartoon to teach the children of that era important geography lessons, as 2 years prior, in 1991, the Looney Tunes spin-off Tiny Toons Adventures taught kids the even more obscure geographical fact that the largest city in Turkey, Istanbul, had in fact, ages ago, once been known as Constantinople. This lesson came in the form of a Tiny Toons music television segment, which saw the characters of Plucky Duck and Hampton J. Pig searching for a missing idol in the Turkish city, set to the catchy tune Istanbul, Not Constantinople by They Might Be Giants. Of course, though the song's usage on Tiny Toons would forever link it with They Might Be Giants to that same generation of fans, their version was itself simply a cover of an already popular novelty song. Istanbul, Not Constantinople, with lyrics by Jimmy Kennedy and music by Nat Simon, was first written in 1953, on the 500th anniversary of the fall of Constantinople to the Ottomans. The song was first recorded by the Canadian singing quartet The Four Lads, but over the following years would be recorded and performed by a number of artists, including Frankie Vaughan, Bing Crosby, and Bette Midler. Still, the They Might Be Giants version has probably had the largest pop culture relevance, not only being featured on Tiny Toons, but also later in episodes of The Simpsons and Netflix's Umbrella Academy. In 1992, 1 year after being featured on Tiny Toons, it was also used as the theme song for the Judge Reinhold TV movie Black Magic. However, another movie that same year, despite its plot largely taking place in a mysterious underground fighting tournament held in Istanbul, regrettably missed the opportunity to also use the song. Though, to be fair, perhaps the studio behind the film, now sadly on their last legs, simply would not have been able to afford the rights to the song, even if they had wanted to. The year is 1992, and Cannon Films are ready to attempt to recreate the magic of one of their most popular series with one of its stars and its original director, and in the process hopefully launch the next big straight-to-video action franchise with American Samurai.
10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. And Trev, if I may, A man can sample pie. A man can college try. A man can wonder why David Bradley was the one and only American Samurai.
All right, so... No, I applaud that, I suppose.
You should not applaud it. I made it up about 10 to 15 minutes ago because I realized I did not have an intro.
Oh, really? Well, I'm surprised that after watching this movie, your mind wasn't just like bursting with like all these different like...
Creativity.
Yeah.
Funny.
Well, this is kind of bittersweet. You know, this is the end of what I believe has been a very, very fun series for us.
Yeah,
and that is our Misfired Cannons series, looking at old franchise starters from my beloved and I think cult film fans' beloved Cannon Studios, Cannon Films from the '80s. So we've looked at 4 of their action franchise attempted starters. And people should really go back and listen to the previous 3 if they haven't. Can you imagine if someone's jumping in at American Samurai? Like this is their first one. They're like, oh my god, someone finally did an American Samurai episode.
They should be on a list.
So I'm probably speaking directly to David Bradley. Maybe he is that person. But if that is the case,
he does have free time looking at his IMDb.
if that is the case,
and we don't like making fun of actors. Sorry. I just had, I just wanted to make sure that
we don't.
People know.
Yeah, and we will not make fun of actors anymore through the rest of this episode. But if that is the case, please go back and listen to the previous three. Of course, Invasion USA, Avenging Force, and Cobra. And this time, we're looking at a movie with equal amounts of like prestige and fame as those, of course. And that is 1992's American Samurai. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about this one? Because I know our listeners need to know a little bit about this one.
They need to know where to find it. They don't need to know how to watch it.
Hey, at least there's an easy answer to that one. So
there is actually that is funny. But yes, this is directed by Sam Furstenberg. He directed Avenging Force, which is one of the episodes we went over. He is a canon go-to guy. This is written by John Corcoran. His first and only credit. He's mostly an actor and a stunt guy. The budget of this film, Trev, a first for F2F. Who knows? The budget and domestic money making of any sorts, we have no idea about this one. This was DTV, direct-to-video.
Yeah.
But again, no reporting on the budget for this. This is at like the tail end of
thinking,
Canon films.
140, 150 million?
I was gonna say, okay, how much was Avatar 3?
Yeah.
0.5% of that one. But yeah, so great pick, Trev. This is going to bring on the listeners and the downloads. This is going to be our number one episode ever downloaded from movies that people can totally find on YouTube.
You gave me a little bit of a hard time about this in the dossier you put together about that, pointing out that as a DTV movie, we don't have that info, and obviously this is not going to be as popular of a movie or probably an episode as our previous three episodes.
And especially, I just love the placement right after Cobra. Which at this point Cobra has actually not been published to the feed. We're kind of recording a little bit in advance here, but I suspect a Stallone action movie is gonna like do okay numbers for us, and to follow it up with this is like sort of hilarious.
Well, let me defend it, and I think the defense is obvious, but I'm still very happy we're doing this, and I think it is important because first of all, chronologically, this does allow us to explore what happened to canon, right? This is obviously we've been trying to we've been kind of tracking the history of canon through these episodes, and so it is kind of natural to say, hey, let's look at one that really represents the moment where canon was really in free fall and was on its last legs.
Yeah. This is the hospice stage.
Yes, a completely different era, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Yeah. But I also just want to acknowledge that I think it's important to this episode because this podcast is just about failed franchise starters. And it's important to remember that theatrical, obviously that's like our main bread and butter. That's what we're going to look at. But there is a such thing as DTV franchises. And in fact, canon with, seems like represents a time, or at least, is connected to a time where that was much more commonplace. The fact that you could have a DTV franchise. You didn't have to play with the big boys all the way to go into theatrical release. You could still be somewhat respectable by just being straight to video. And of course, in the 80s, Full Moon was probably the best example of that with their, horror and sci-fi franchises like Puppet Master, Trancers, Subspecies. But even like going into like the 90s and early 2000s, some theatrical franchises also then kind of pivoted to do primarily just DTV sequels like Tremors and Sniper.
Wishmaster.
So I mean, this was a thing, and it's worth looking at how. Isn't it interesting how not even this, right? Not even like in the world of DTV, this could gain any traction. What does that say for canon at the time? What does it say for like the kind of obvious cynical attempt to redo one of their popular franchise, so there's actually quite a lot to look at here. So yes, I realize this is like, it seems like we're going out with a whimper instead of a bang, but I think it's like kind of fun to end on a movie that does represent like, oh, this is what canon came to.
It's like every great story, you have a climax in Cobra and then you have a falling action, right? So it works. Yeah. And I have to give you a hard time because yes, I think this is something we have to go over. Canon Films or like Carolco Pictures, like there was a lot of these studios back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s that were exploiting that rental shop market, right? And they were making a ton of money. And that's what's so fascinating, I think, about this one is that, yes, not even American Samurai.
Yeah.
In a world of American Ninja 5 and maybe 6, there is no American Samurai.
And that said, there is at least one thing about it, and I'm sure you'll probably kind of instantly clue into what I'm saying about it. There is like at least one element of it that I think is worthy of like attention from action movie fans in terms of, a particular cast member. So we'll talk about that as well.
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, like if Cobra was canon as Luke Skywalker, celebrating, killing the Emperor and burning their father's body and celebrating with the Ewoks, a very celebratory moment, then American Samurai is like, canon living on that island, drinking the milk from that creature and just being like a grump, and getting ready to die. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Feeding into the Last Jedi hate right there.
No, don't forget, I love The Last Jedi.
It's true. We are defenders of it.
Yes.
In retrospect, the entire trilogy is a total mess, but
Yeah.
Anyway, different conversation.
Conversation.
Hey, it's a conversation for a different time, as
it is.
Maz Kanata, famed character Maz Kanata would say.
So do you want to talk a little bit before we get into I guess like we've been kind of going through these talking about like the different leading men, and I think that'll be important again this time because this is again another very important figure in canon history. But should we first just provide a little bit more detail on what we were just saying about where canon was at this point?
Yes, and I right before we recorded, I said to you, I'm probably going to lean on you a little bit here, and this is what I was going to talk about. Was that, or I wanted you to talk about, is like. In the last couple episodes, we were kind of leading into the mid to late 80s as a turning point for this company, that they were riding high until just before this movie came out, and they started to really flail, and their debt really started to pile. And as much as Golan and Globus were like focused on creative and being very driven by making something fun or aspiring, I think, to something more creative, they were not as financially savvy at the later years here. So I guess I'll throw it to you and tell me, Dad.
Well, I mean, that's definitely true, right? I mean, like as we've talked about before, they were a company that never like they would have a couple like minor hits, and that would be enough to finance like what they were doing through like the smaller movies they were doing, but they never had enough giant hits to really justify the amount of projects they were trying to sink money into and the amount of deals they were making. And they were one of those companies who would go to Cannes, they would go to other markets and just like pitch all these movie ideas, pitch posters, pitch movie titles, then make deals for these movies and then maybe make them, and like it really started to fall apart. And then they had a series of huge box office disappointments with we talked about Over the Top being a great example of that. Like after Cobra, they felt like maybe they're riding high. Like, oh my God, we got Stallone. Cobra did pretty well. What do you want to do next, Sly? He's like, I want to make an arm wrestling movie. And they're like, oh shit. But they do it, and we see what happens there. That's a total disaster for them. And then they do the Masters of the Universe movie, which again probably seemed like just money in the bank, but we've covered that movie before. It might have been money in the bank if maybe they had made a Masters of the Universe movie instead of whatever the hell that was. But again, they didn't even have really the money to do that. So what they made also disappointed the fans on both the creative and kind of just like the visual level of it and everything.
What I noticed too is that after watching that Electric Boogaloo documentary, there was clips of Golan and Globus like talking about how they couldn't imagine spending so much money on certain movies. Like, we like to keep our budgets tight and neat, around 5-ish million, even less. But then going forward in their panic stage, they seem to sink so much more money into these projects.
It's interesting to think what could have been if they had just stuck to their original model, right?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like the Blumhouse, thing where like Blumhouse is still, they're doing okay, but didn't you kind of also like kind of question when Blumhouse decided to start trying to be bigger and like instead of sticking to that original just 5 million and under model, and like the same things happen with A24 now, where A24 suddenly, because they got very, very successful with the model they had, now they want to be one of the big boys too and play on that level. And it's been working okay with stuff like Marty Supreme, but are they going to be able to keep it up? So it's you sometimes your eyes can get too big and
This is more of a real world anecdote from my personal life here. That I have an analogy that I want to make. In the last couple of years, we had a family run company. Over the last, we started over 20 years ago. Well, in the last couple of years, we sold it, and everything's been fantastic. There was a moment where maybe more than a decade ago, we were approached to buy another not sister company, but probably competitor, we'll say, but in the same kind of marketplace. We were approached. And I remember me and my dad sitting down to discuss what to do and where we would go and if we were to buy it and who would move where, blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, I go, we're doing so well with a slice of the pie. Yeah. Why would we ever bake a whole new one? And it's so fascinating when you see, I guess, capitalism and work in practice. Sorry. Like I'm not even anti-capitalist. I'm a business guy. I'm a sales guy. Like I am pro-capitalism to a point, which a lot of capitalists will tell me that then that makes me not a capitalist. But anyway, that's a different conversation. But I want to say it's like it is remarkable to me when I see these companies doing well, doing what they know best, and then they just get ahead of their skis for some like weird delusion of grandeur. And then they just implode.
It's ego, and then it's also like, I guess this is connected to ego, but, they probably, I have a feeling Golan Globus, especially Golan probably, as the more creative-minded, like Globus is the one who was trying to keep it all under control. He was like the financial guy. Golan's got these big ideas, right? He's this huge movie fan. He wants to work with like the biggest filmmakers, but he also wants to be prestigious. I'm sure they knew they were successful with what they were doing, but I'm sure it also like stuck in their craw a little bit that they were looked at as like the minor studio who makes little cheapy dumb action movies and little things, and they wanted to have more respect. Sure. And I'm guessing that when they were at the Cannes Film Festival and like when they went to award shows and stuff, they probably felt the other studio heads like kind of laughing at them, and that bothered them. I know it, and they were like, I think a lot of what they did in their later years was kind of very much motivated by, they couldn't just, it's easy to say in retrospect, they should have, as you just said, just accepted, hey, actually it kind of rules to be like the successful little guy and be like the alternative and like have that be our market. But instead they were like, no, you know what, we want to take on Universal, we want to take on Warner Brothers, we want to get up to that level, and they just didn't have the money and the acumen to do that. And so the last kind of, I just talked about some of the giant, bombs, but the one that was kind of like the final nail in the coffin for the Golan and Globus era was the Superman 4, right? They get the rights to Superman 4. They plug ahead with that. But the problem is, they have to make it on a very low budget. It's a piece. I mean, it's kind of a fun watch, but it is a piece of shit because it's like so cheap. The story, like they let Christopher Reeve have complete creative control, and he comes up with a story that is more message than superheroics. So it's just a huge mess, and it's again a giant bomb, and that one really takes them out financially. And at this point, they're getting sued by like Dustin Hoffman because they signed a deal with him, and part of that deal was that they wouldn't say they had signed a deal with him. It was supposed to be secret until a certain point, but right away they took out advertisements promoting he was going to work with Canon, so he sues them. Yeah. Like all these like stars were just getting upset. Michael Dudikoff, who we covered before, would eventually sue Canon, saying he hadn't been paid for like any of the movies he'd made for them, and that had been quite a few. So yeah, it was just all falling apart, and eventually even the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission gets involved, and they start like investigating Canon's financial reports because they're pretty sure that Canon is like kind of fraudulently misstating their tax returns and everything. Totally. And so it just all like what the minor success they had in the mid '80s just entirely collapses, and that allows them to get sold. Essentially, they're absorbed. This businessman, I believe. I can't remember exactly what his direct background is, but this businessman named Giancarlo Peretti. He's an Italian financier, and he has a holding company, and his holding company called Path Communications, they buy Canon, they take it over, and at that point Golan just takes off. He's like, I can't deal with this. This is the company I like. Well, he didn't even start it, right? We talked about how they bought it, but he really saw it as his baby at this point. And he did not want to work for someone else. So Golan took off. Globus decided to remain with Path and with Peretti, which also formed like kind of a fissure between those two for the rest of their lives, unfortunately, as well.
Peretti, if I remember correctly, he was in the documentary, right? He was kind of a shyster, right? Like he was a guy he was kind of cooking the books as well.
Well, because here's the addendum on that.
And he worked for the mob, I think.
Him buying it does not solve their financial problems at all. No. Like it just creates new financial problems, right? Yeah. Because at the same time, he makes like a bid for it right after he gets like Canon and kind of absorbs it into Path. He also makes a bid for MGM, right? And he ends up buying MGM, and it creates MGM Path Communications. And so now this merger, it really seems like what's the point of Canon, kind of, if you have MGM? But I guess to his credit, or at least just maybe smart business sense, he did want to still maintain Canon, not only their library, which obviously has some value, but he wanted to kind of use Canon as like his low budget wing. He'd say like, well, okay, MGM
Right.
is the prestigious studio, but we'll still crank out like small little genre fare and we'll put it under the Canon title. And this movie is still like the movie we're covering today is kind of a result of that. But I don't even have the time, the acumen, or the detailed history knowledge to go into how much more of a shit show Canon was in the remaining years.
Yeah.
Suffice to say, it just kind of kept falling apart, and like more and more, their library just had to keep being sold off. Eventually, as you said, I believe Preddy was like forced out as well, and then it was just kind of someone else bought Canon, but it just limped along to kind of like a sad end. I know there was even a point where. At a certain point, there was a bunch of Canon movies that were like announced or were like in production, including this one, I believe. And I believe it was Preddy. If it wasn't Preddy, it was like a newer owner got in trouble because they were at like a Tokyo International Film Market and they were like selling these movies, and like the creditors who like were trying to like get all their money back had to step in and say, no, you can't sell those movies, you have to hold on to them, because it was like this one last kind of attempt to just sell off all like their remaining assets. I will say, because you and I like how things are like always kind of circular and things that come back around, it was interesting, and I didn't even know this until doing research on this, that in its like dying years, as it's like really falling apart, one of the last substantial things Canon does do, and I didn't even realize how involved they were in this, is that Canon did produce the initial Walker Texas Ranger movies, the TV movies that led to the show.
Oh, funny.
So Canon actually is like involved in like the creation of that show. But that wasn't enough, right? And in 1994, their last movie ever, Hellbound, which is a Chuck Norris movie, was released. And at that point, just all of the remaining like interest in Canon Pictures was sold to a company called VMI Acquisitions. They just they were going to try and keep the company going. And then this is interesting: a group of creditors, including Charles Bronson, sued Canon Pictures to force it into bankruptcy. So like all these people had worked for in the past just were like, it just had these like. Had revenge on their mind, right? They were like sick of it, and they just wanted this company to go away. And I believe most of the library ended up going back to like, MGM held a lot of it. Other pieces of it were sold off to other companies. Oh, it was a guy named Christopher Pierce I just saw, who was trying to sell off these movies. But yeah, so it just limped along to a sad end. And in those final years, like they were still making movies with the same people. They were still making Chuck Norris movies. There were still a couple more Dudikoff movies. Obviously, they were still trying to do something with the actor we'll talk about today. But the glory days were clearly well behind them.
Yeah, and it's like, it's a shame, and it's well documented, especially in that documentary Electric Boogaloo. But it's a shame that this studio like met its end this way. Like it does, like, it is a bummer. Like it's not like a celebratory like of course these guys weren't paying their talent, so I mean that is an issue too. So I mean let's not say that they were totally innocent, but Canon, especially coming from my perspective in doing these last few episodes with you and Brian, our guest on Invasion USA, Canon was like really set the tone for this DTV market. Like they're just so influential, and so much so that like when they were kind of out of the picture or dying or like completely out of it entirely, other companies propped up to like copy them, and I was like, you sent me this great interview with Sam Furstenberg on the definitive director's cut of American Samurai, which we will get to. But he talks about how he actually left Canon when he was like dead and dying to go work for New Image, a new production company that was again trying to just copy or imitate Canon films. And they started working on a movie called Cyborg Cop, which they even said, hey, do what you did with American Ninja and just kind of like do that same tone, that same vibe, just do it again. So it's just interesting that, all these vultures, I guess, came around to pick the corpse of Canon films. So it's depressing that that's where the studio was left. However, that's the facts. That's the brass tacks of it all.
And that's
But,
kind
yeah.
of the sad thing, too, because the times they were changing at that point, but Canon could have rolled with those changes a little bit better if they had accepted
Definitely.
their lot in life, as you said. And in particular, obviously they burst on the scene with a couple, minor theatrical hits, but I think obviously the real answer for them should have been to accept more themselves as the premier DTV company. And
Totally.
I think they couldn't. I think to them that probably seemed like small potatoes, but if they had just kept their mind more on just concentrating on DTV instead of trying to have these big theatrical releases that almost always fell on their face for them financially and everything else, they could have controlled the DTV market throughout the 90s and into the 2000s before that market changed. And if they had done that, there's a world where they just rolled right along through that. And yes, obviously the whole industry changed, but couldn't you see if Canon had been viable through all that and had created this incredible library of theatrical stuff in the 80s, but then tons of great and beloved cult DTV stuff through the 90s and 2000s? Canon could still exist today and have its own streaming service easily.
Definitely.
And be making straight for streaming movies while also having all their old library on streaming. Instead, because their catalog was pretty much just sold off, most of the Canon shit is just sitting on Tubi. So it's but they could still be an entity today if they had just accepted, let's only concentrate on DTV, where the rewards are lower, but the money you have to sink into it is lower too. So
Do you know how many Bruce Willis movies they could have made? It's unreal.
yeah.
Because right now while you're talking, I was just picturing. Remember the beginnings of video rental kiosks and shit like that. That's where I could see Canon would have gone. To video rental, that their own kiosk, the Canon kiosk.
Yeah.
And then it became, like you're saying, something in the vein of Shudder. Right,
Yeah.
for $5-7 a month, you can, or it's a tack on to MGM, seeing if that Peretti guy was still involved. I mean, we could guess till the cows come home, but they seemed malleable enough and seemed creative enough to go with the ebbs and flows. But I think you're so right. The ego of it all really, really took over. And like you said, and I think it's everybody says, but Superman 4 just absolutely fucking killed them. That is like the double tap in the back of the skull, maybe in the front, but that was not the venture for them at all. They almost killed that fucking IP.
They did. And you had mentioned before, you mentioned in a previous episode too, how they also in typical Canon fashion, they went out to the trades and announced, we are making Spider-Man. We have Toby Hooper, where Dudikoff is going to play Peter Parker, and then that falls apart. And I bet you they probably had to pay some money back to Marvel on that. So it's just everything, bad business decision after bad business decision. Very sad to see them go out that way. They leave behind a crazy legacy and a fun legacy. And obviously now there's been 2 documentaries made about them. I haven't seen the other one, the Go-Go Boys, which is the one that Golan Globus kind of controlled a little bit more.
Right. In response to the Boogaloo one.
In response to Electric Boogaloo, I do want to see it. Of course, I want to see their side of the story, and I imagine it'll be just as crazy. So I will check it out at some point. But they remain like a cult thing today. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to imagine a world where they're actually still around. And if there was a Canon streaming service today, there's no reason why they wouldn't just be still making more. You'd be doing American Ninja Reborn with Dudikoff as the old mentor.
Sure.
Bringing in some new generation, and instead it's just kind of they're just movies for cult fans today.
Totally. Well, American Samurai is kind of, I think you hinted at it just, a couple of minutes ago, but it is just another hope to replicate something else.
Yeah.
There's not a crazy amount of BTS on this because, like we were saying, Canon is flailing, but they hire their go-to guy, Sam Furstenberg, and is like, hey, you brought us American Ninja, do it again, American Samurai. This, if even just the titles alone is evidence
Oh yeah,
of what we're talking about. Like,
I even read that the original, I mean, at some point in development, and I don't know if this is apocryphal or if it's true, but at some point in development early on, the name of this movie was actually Ninja: American Samurai, which is like,
oh, wow.
First of all, hilarious because
Yeah,
it makes
yeah,
no
yeah.
sense, but it's even like more craven about what they were trying to do, right? And yeah, it's not just Furstenberg. It's kind of that thing of like, well, we have the successful franchise. Let's try to put together as many of the pieces as we can to this, including the leading man.
This really reminded me of our talk about Avenging Force, and about how you had Michael Dudikoff in American Ninja and then they were starting a new franchise, Avenging Force, starring Michael Dudikoff as a different character that was played by Chuck Norris in Invasion USA. I've gone cross-eyed.
Wait, I'm going to make it worse in a second, but go ahead.
Yeah, and then in this movie, they're like, okay, but Dudikoff is not coming back for American Ninja 3, 4, and 5, so we're going to get this guy, David Bradley, to come into American Ninja, and then said, while we're making American Ninja, let's bring David Bradley onto American Samurai as the lead as well. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, American Ninja 5, David Bradley's back, but he's playing a different character.
Okay, get ready for this, buddy, because as I told you...
that wasn't enough.
About a year ago, I watched all 5 American Ninja movies in like the span of a couple days. Yes. And it was great fun. It was, as one does. It was great fun, but it reminded me of how crazy this franchise is. And we'll talk more about David Bradley and who he is in a moment. But for now, I just want to quickly summarize the history of American Ninja, or at least in particular, like the history of the leads and the characters they play. Okay. Because as you just said, we talked about this more in the Avenging Force episode. American Ninja was, they're like introducing Michael Dudikoff to the world as their new action star. And he plays a character named Joe Armstrong in that movie. And he is introduced as the American Ninja. And when we talk about this movie later, I'm going to talk more about his origin in that movie because, no surprise, there's some similarities between the two movies. But so Joe Armstrong is the American Ninja, and then Steve James is his sidekick. They both return for American Ninja 2. Which to me is kind of like the peak of the franchise. That's my favorite one. But as you just said, like Michael Dudikoff decides not to come back for part 3. Now, if you go online, there's a kind of this persistent rumor that the reason Michael Dudikoff didn't come back for part 3 is because they were filming it in North Africa and he was like against apartheid, which when I first heard that, I was like, you know what? Good on that guy, man. You know, that makes me like Dudikoff even more. And then I watched an interview with Dudikoff and they asked him about that and he's like, oh, I was just too busy. They had me doing other stuff and I didn't do it. It's like, you idiot, just go with it, man. Just say that's the reason. So if you ever hear that, Dudikoff does not seem to say that's the truth, but you know, he should have let the legend become the truth on that one. Mm-hmm. But he decides not to come back, so they have to replace him. And as I said, the obvious answer to me was just like, elevate Steve James to the lead. But of course, they're not going to do that, right? He needs to remain the sidekick. So they decide to bring in a new white American Ninja in the lead, and they find David Bradley. And David Bradley is introduced as another American Ninja. His name is Sean. And so it's just like a brand new character, but he's American Ninja. Okay, now you said Dudikoff doesn't come back for part 4. Actually, part 4 is the one that unites the two of them. So they're both in part 4. Dudikoff does come back, except it's what's initially positioned as a movie that is going to be like the two American Ninjas working together, and oh my god, isn't this going to be exciting? Dudikoff kind of comes in and flexes his muscles, and he does not really want to share the spotlight, so he makes them change the story into a movie that is like all about David Bradley for like the first half hour, but then he gets captured, and then Dudikoff has to come in and like save the day, and Dudikoff like comes in and rescues him, and that's what the movie is. And to this day, David Bradley and David Bradley doesn't do a lot of interviews now. We'll talk about that, but he was pretty vocal in the aftermath of that he thought the movie would have been a lot more successful if it had been the two of them working together,
like a team up. Yeah,
like a team up. And he's right, obviously. You know,
this is like the Fast 8 of American Ninja. You know, they don't share the same screen.
Yeah. Okay, so just to clarify, as a quick reminder, American Ninja 1 and 2, Michael Dudikoff as Joe. American Ninja 3, David Bradley as Sean. American Ninja 4, Michael Dudikoff as Joe, David Bradley as Sean. American Ninja 5, only David Bradley's back as Joe? What? Now he's playing a new character whose name is the same first name as Michael Dudikoff's character in the previous American Ninjas. Your head obviously will just explode trying to think about this, but not surprisingly, just the easy backstory is it was not developed as American Ninja 5. It was developed as an entirely different, like ninja-based, movie. In fact, when you watch it, it's very much like it's actually kind of like a comedy. It's got like much more of a comedic beat. It's kind of made almost like a family film because it teams him up with this like little kid. But yeah, so that they just slapped American Ninja 5 on that just to kind of trade in on it being David Bradley. So very weird franchise. 2 leading men, but 3 different characters. But only 2 first names. I don't know. It's a wild one. But
I want to say I mentioned that New Image and Furstenberg went on to make the Cyborg Cop movie. Furstenberg did not with David Bradley, but Furstenberg didn't come back for the sequels. But David Bradley plays a character, Jack Ryan, a CIA analyst for the. No, I'm just joking.
I know he does play Jack Ryan, yes.
But he is playing Jack Ryan in those movies. So anyway,
yeah. And Furstenberg also only did the two. He did the two first American Ninjas, but none of the other ones. So I believe this movie was actually his first time working with David Bradley. He did not work with him on the sequels of American Ninja. Yeah.
They became friends, though. I wrote that down, that they actually have a great working relationship and personal relationship, too. So, well, I guess I hear that from Furstenberg, and he's trying to sell a book when I read this article. So,
I think there's no reason not to think that, because even despite and like I said, I've watched recent interviews with Dudikoff, and he still loves Furstenberg. I think I think actors liked Furstenberg, because I think he was the guy, he was the one just on set trying to get the movies done while he's, kind of trying to deflect all the financial bullshit happening behind the scenes. But I think it sounds like he was actually kind of fun to work with. And, I like Sam Furstenberg. I think he knows the kind of movies he's making. He knows he's making schlock. But he just wants to get it done fast, and there's still a little bit of style to it. I believe that they probably got along. And we can talk more about David Bradley now, but from most accounts too, it sounds like I've never heard any horror stories about David Bradley in general. It seems like people do like David Bradley. Now, we should point out really quickly, in case anyone's listening to this and confused, this is not the David Bradley who played Walder Frey in Game of Thrones. However, the Harry Potter
character, on the grounds of Hogwarts. I will say that
imagine a version of this movie.
It made it very difficult to research this film, by the way.
Imagine a version of this movie, though, where that David Bradley played this character. Instantly about 2 stars better, I would say.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Not only did David Bradley play a big role in this film, but another big, name known around the world to this day, let's say it, more than David Bradley.
Oh, yeah.
Furstenberg hired Mark Dacascos into this, his first film role.
It's definitely his first significant role. I think he has maybe one small part in something before this, but this is his he played. I'm looking. There was a movie he made in 1990 called Angel Town, where he played Stoner's driver. I'm gonna imagine that's not a huge role. But,
no, that did not.
He's the co-lead of this one.
That did lead to Iron Chef, though, a direct correlation.
Oh, okay.
Just in case I didn't include that in the notes this time, but
okay.
But yes, Mark Dacascos, Iron Chef, Double Dragon, a movie we watched together on one of our COVID movie nights.
And a movie that we will have to watch again someday for this podcast, my friends.
Yes, we will make it many years from now, though.
Yeah.
He was also in John Wick 3, which that one is, I guess, more familiar to the mainstream audience, I would say.
Yeah, I think a lot of people also know him as
John Wick.
I think a lot of people also know him as kind of a breakout role for him here was as Manny in Brotherhood of the Wolf. Even though that's a French film, it still kind of popped over here a little bit, and he's a scene stealer in that. I always point to his best. The movie I would say everyone should see from Mark Dacascos. I wish it was a little bit
Wing
more
Commander 4, The Price of Freedom, Second Lieutenant Troy, Cat Scratch Carter. No, it's a video game. Sorry, that's a video game.
No, he has a 1997 movie called Drive. So not the Ryan Gosling Refn movie, but his movie Drive with Nicholas Winding Refn and Brittany Murphy is a really as I just said, that every action head listening just nodded in appreciation. But it's a movie that I wish was bigger than just that cult, because it's a really undersung little fun kung fu movie. Right. So that's a good one. But yeah, I love Mark Dacascos.
Oh yeah, he's a great screen presence, and he's fun, and
he also played Eric Draven in the Crow TV show, to connect back to a previous episode of ours. But so they can't all be winners. But
no. Let's give a shout out to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I forgot. He was on there for 11 episodes.
Yeah.
To all our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. heads out there.
Yeah. We are Legion.
R.I.P.
We are small.
Yeah, there's 17 of us.
Yeah.
We hold.
He's also featured in a couple. He's the star of a few movies in Brian's book. I know Brian is a big Dacascos fan, and in fact, the cover image of Brian's book is Mark Dacascos from I Am Omega, which is the Asylum mockbuster of I Am Legend that he stars in.
Nice.
But he's also in Alien Agent, which I know Brian writes about in that as well. So a beloved figure, especially for B action fans. But it's cool. When John Wick 3 happened, it was cool. Obviously, you wish it had happened a little earlier for him, but it was cool to see him finally get his spotlight in a pretty big one finally.
And a really fun role too. Like, not only
Yeah.
is he like really good at the action, but he had this like fangirl like mentality in the movie that he was like excited to meet John Wick and fight him and try to kill him. Great role. By the way, what's with the free ads for Brian's book?
Hey,
Just throwing it out here.
he was kind of. In fact, he shared some thoughts again that I'll
You did? Okay,
I'll
good,
read
good,
a little.
good.
later,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, okay. Apologies to Brian.
yeah, he put in some work too. He can.
Sounds good. Okay, let's talk about this movie.
Yeah, let's do it.
The sword, chosen weapon of the samurai.
I won't fight you.
Two brothers. One lives by the samurai code.
I am Yakuza now.
The other lives for revenge. Drawn into a bizarre murder.
Do you know who the killer is?
I have a damn good idea.
Your life is in danger if you do not fight.
Where the world's most brutal weapons masters meet for money and fame. He must face them all.
Your destiny.
And his own brother.
We have to get out of here.
To take back his family's honor. But in the Bloodsport known as Live Blade, there are no rules.
I have to do this.
And only one can survive. Martial arts master David Bradley of American Ninja. And karate and weapons champion Mark Dacascos. American Samurai.
An American orphan raised by a Japanese samurai is on the hunt for his long-lost Yakuza half-brother, and in doing so, gets roped into fighting a parade of oddly dressed gladiators in an underground fight club. All this because a sword was stolen and a reporter got kidnapped. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yep. That is American Samurai, a movie that I would say, if nothing else, no matter what else we're going to say about it, I would say that probably nobody would predict what the second half of this movie is going to be based on the first half. Mm-hmm. And that's something, Mm-hmm. So there's that. But with that in mind,
we will discuss why they maybe that second half is even existing. And it might have to do with stuff that's in a warehouse and we need to get our tax benefits for.
But Chris, I know this is obviously your first time seeing American Samurai. I imagine maybe we will create some other first-time watches on this movie because it's not a movie that is like lived on with the same level of like cult status as even something like American Ninja. But and this is also obviously your introduction to David Bradley and all that, So what did you? And we've been having a good time so far. We've been having a good time with the previous ones. What did you think of American Samurai?
Well, I'm glad we talked in depth about the rotting corpse of Cannon films, because this is a piece of shit. like not even respectfully. I'm not burying the lead here with my thoughts. I watched this on YouTube. There's two cuts of the movie, okay, and we'll talk about that and see if Trev did what he promised he'd do. But there's two cuts. The one that was completely scrambled by the studio, that was basically stripped away from Furstenberg after he filmed it. He filmed everything in Turkey, and then the editing went back to Israel, and then the material was sent to headquarters in LA, and then the company was like busy doing nothing. So what they did was just completely change this movie from his account, Sam Furstenberg. So they hired an editor, they changed the order of the story, they injected new scenes, they completely took out the mystery of it all. He has a quote here. The way I see it, a martial arts movie must have an element of mystery and suspense in it, with some unknown portions which are only revealed at the end of the story. This was the way the movie was originally structured. It started with a mysterious dream, and only at the end of the movie, the big secret of the hero and his nemesis are revealed. The new edit of the story is totally linear, and there's no secret, and blah, 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 blah. It's childish. That's what he says. potentially that is interesting if this was recut, but it's okay. In Invasion, sorry, I'm jumping around. Just like the edit of the movie. Yeah. But I remember in our discussion with Brian in Invasion USA, I equated, probably wrongly at the time, I equated Cannon Films to Roger Corman.
Yeah.
This is what I was talking about. This is a movie that feels so much cheaper and less inspired than the other 3 Cannon films that we have covered. This feels like rental video slop. That's just kind of like, it feels like a trap in a lot of ways. Hey, remember American Ninja? Well, now we have American Samurai. And then you get duped. So there might be defenders of this movie, and maybe I'm talking to one. But I just found this like the junk that I think gets put out every now and then from companies like this. This was the one that I felt was like the wink wink was gone. It was like way too self-serious. It was neither fun nor fulfilling to me. I have more in-depth specifics, but I've gone on long enough, and I'll throw it to you, Mr. Man, who maybe watched this movie twice. Within
twice
the last
episode, yeah. This you're not going to find an American Samurai Defender here, buddy. So
okay, thank God.
Yeah,
oh,
no,
God.
That's, as I said, I was trying. I thought I was hinting that earlier, but yeah, we are looking at the dying days of canon, and that is reflected in the movie as well.
Yeah.
I think there's still something interesting to be said about the movie, and I will say this, and maybe even this will make you roll your eyes. I'm actually right now. I'm talking about the linear cut, so like the cut that most people would know, the cut that was released, right? And even that, we not to bury the lead. This movie is easily available to watch on YouTube. And thankfully, both versions that are on YouTube represent like the uncut version, because when this movie was put on video in America, it was like a heavily cut version with all the gore and violence cut out, and it was only international markets that got the uncut version. But that's the version that's been uploaded to YouTube, so at least you get some gore out of it, right?
Yep.
Okay, I was gonna say, so maybe you'll roll your eyes at this, but responding to like just the linear cut, the cut that most people would know before Furstenberg went in and made his director's cut. I'm actually kind of on board with the movie for like the first half hour, not because it's good, but because to me it's the right kind of bad. There's some like pretty entertaining stuff, in particular in how aggressive the relationship between David Bradley and the female lead is in this.
Oh my God,
like
I know.
how they just like hate each other, and they're like bickering with such animosity that it's like comical to me. And then on a dime they like start making out and are like in love, and it's just like so stupid it's funny. So like part of me is like, okay, this is bad, but at least it's like a bad that I'm kind of vibing with and having fun. And then it gets to like what the movie really is, which is just a Bloodsport ripoff. Yeah. And the movie, and even then, like for a split second, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be great, because the first kind of like people you see in Bloodsport, it's like, did they like time warp a barbarian in from like another dimension? Like everybody looks like they're from like different time periods. I'm like, okay, this might still be fun. But instead, the movie just like grinds to a halt.
Yes.
And has no more forward momentum. And it's like really too bad, because we've talked about this before. Like, I'm a sucker for a good fighting tournament movie. That's a template that should always work. That's like so easy. I love Bloodsport, and this movie is just trying to be Bloodsport, but that's the element that actually kills the movie. Mm-hmm. I will say the one bright spot of the movie to me is Mark Dacascos. I don't know if you agree, but at least he's really having fun in this, and he's like popping in a way where we can go like, I get it that he became something after this, and that he's the clear standout here. What you said about it being dead serious is clearly to me the big problem, because I will also say, so we've talked about the leading men in these movies, and like I know you thought Stallone was a little better in Cobra than I did. I still think you were bringing a little existing goodwill towards Stallone into that, but I would say we've now looked at like 4 movies where I would say the lead performances are all kind of like one note essentially.
Sure.
But with David Bradley. David Bradley's best performance in the American Ninja franchise is in Part 5. I remember watching Part 5 and being like, holy shit, this guy's actually like super likable. When you team him up with a kid and you have him be like more funny, he was like really good at like the comedy, and suddenly like unveiled this like whole new side of him. And then this movie is like, hey, go back to being just like stoic, boring guy. And it's like, oh, all right, and like so, and then it's like, okay, well, it's at least he's like in real life he's a super talented, accomplished martial artist. The movie's going to show that off, right? No, the fight scenes are all edited like shit, so it doesn't matter, So it's like nothing about like what he could have brought to the screen is being like capitalized on here anyways. Only Dacascos is being allowed to have any fun, and yeah, the Bloodsport element just like totally just brings the momentum of the movie to a halt. So yeah, this one's definitely a bummer, but I guess it's kind of appropriate to say here we see it, right? This is Canon just like trying to eke out this like pathetic last little you like the ninjas, right? So maybe you like the samurai too. Plus it should just be said, my last little thing, let's just face it, ninjas are cooler than samurais, and that might just be it right there.
I will not take any Last Samurai slander on this podcast. So
I love Last Samurai. Obviously, I love Seven Samurai. I love a lot of samurai movies.
And Shogun.
Of course. Look, I'm not anti-samurai. I'm just saying if you...
anti-samurai.
What a great say. I'm not anti-samurai. But on like the scale, I think we would agree that ninjas are just kind of inherently cooler,
I'm a samurai guy.
I'm not surprised there's 5 American ninjas and 1 American samurai. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair. And like 3 ninjas kick back. Ninja is just inherently more cool. I mean, the Power Rangers, ninjetti kick. I get it. I'm there with you. Yeah. There was something I was going to say to you, and I lost my track because I started making ninja jokes.
Well, so we covered the Bloodsport of it, the David Bradley of it.
Oh, yes.
Dacascos. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, this is what I was going to say. Remember I mentioned... I said it offhandedly, but I said this was kind of like canon in hospice, right? Mm-hmm. Cobra to me feels like, when somebody's like maybe doing better.
Yeah.
And then they're like, everything's fine. And then they're like dead within 3 days. That's the podcast. That's been our theme months. But I'm going to push back a little bit on the beginning of the movie. But I understand what you're saying. So it's not really pushback. It's more like, I guess, more objective annoyance, if that makes sense. Because this movie is absolutely cut to hell.
Oh yeah.
There's like the harshest cuts you could ever imagine in a movie.
Did you also notice that like 90% of the dialogue and conversations are off
is
camera?
ADR'd?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Even the sex scene is ADR'd, and they're filmed in shadows, and it's definitely not them. It's absolutely doubles, 1,000%.
You need to open up.
It's easier said than done.
You're carrying a lot of baggage with you.
Yes, the amount of harsh cuts and ADR, this is just like a Frankenstein. The beginning starts with a plane crash and then immediately cuts to a kid that's like 12 being like trained by a samurai in the woods. There's no explanation. So you're like, okay, was that the baby I just saw? Like, I guess I'll go with this. Okay. Becomes a Karate Kid movie for 2 minutes. And then boom, he's a teenager. And you're like, wait. Okay. All right. Passage of time. And then there's a rivalry between another teenager that's with him. And you're like, okay, maybe they're brothers. And then boom, we're cut again, and they're adults. And you're like, wait a second, we're 5 minutes in.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, Mark Dacascos is hissing at Andrew, and he's like, I'm a Yakuza now, and hey, Dad, you don't treat me the same as you treat him, and he's a gaijin, and blah, blah, blah. And then, boom, it cuts again. And David Bradley's character, Andrew, is living downtown Japan somewhere, and he obviously has a life of his own, and apparently we skipped more time. So it's like, at this point, we've probably skipped 25 to 30 years of backstory from beginning of the plane crash to now. And then the inciting incident happens where a sword is stolen, and then boom, another time jump. It's 3 months later. Dude, this was like, I don't... You can hear it in my voice, right?
even the way it's doled out, right? Because as you said, like, so when we jump forward to the modern day of this movie, we catch up to David Bradley in his apartment, and these like gangsters come in and to steal a sword. Yeah. And he confronts them, and there's a fight scene, but they end up shooting him and getting away with the sword. And then as you said, then suddenly we just jump ahead, but we get some like voiceover narration from him to say like, yeah, and then I recovered from the bullet, and then like the police didn't find anything. So anyways, 3 months later, my editor called me and said he was sending me on this assignment, and you're like, oh, I guess he's a reporter. Yeah, like, that's how we find out. Like, and then you're playing catch up on like what is the deal with this like story that he's investigating, because it's just like suddenly been introduced to us. Look, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm actually saying What you're talking about is how terrible the movie is in this early going. Yes, 100%. But that to me is also, again, what makes it kind of like ironically enjoyable. Because it's like,
I know what you
holy
mean,
crap,
for
this
sure.
is like so bad. And that's the thing is like once it gets to the Bloodsport part in the second half, even that stops, right? The crazy cutting and everything just kind of goes away. And now
does.
it's just a bad Bloodsport clone. Like that's the problem. I would have rather the movie was like the kind of bad it was in the first 20 minutes throughout, because at least that was kind of fascinating, where I'm like, what? Why is everything ADR? Why is the
Like a
editing so
fever dream.
haphazard? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Did you feel the same way I felt, that the only reason that second half, or about 50 minutes of tacked on Bloodsport, is the joke that I made about like we have leftover costumes and sets from other thing, like they're in a warehouse, we have to use them, right?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt that they are like, look, we're doing Bloodsport, but we got these costumes, let's try and make it a little bit more interesting.
And what was annoying me about that is because you can, how do I say this? There is something interesting or compelling about a sibling redemption family arc. Okay,
Sure.
There is something there. There is a seed of something, and there's a way to connect that reasonably.
The
to the Bloodsport
idea,
clone.
not to cut you off, but the idea of Dacascos' character is like the best idea in the movie, right? Because it
Yes,
makes
it is.
sense. You totally understand why he would be jealous of this like white kid whose dad decided to raise and became like the favored son and became like a better samurai than him, and that drives him to join the Yakuza. That sounds like a great movie, actually.
Yeah. I love the motivation. I get it. And then there's a way to bridge this Bloodsport gap in the sense of like, I'm not going to rewrite the movie, but let's just say they figured it out. Okay. What I hate most of all is that Andrew just goes along with it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really have a reason to, other than, I mean, I guess they kidnap his girlfriend at this point, which he hates. So I wrote the same thing down, by the way. It was so aggravating. They were so abrasive to each other. Andrew's character is like so mean to her.
Yeah.
He's like abusive. And they're acting like sworn enemies out of nowhere.
Were you gonna question me all the way to Istanbul?
Maybe.
Thanks for the warning. Maybe I'll just call Finley and get another photographer. Gonna strangle Finley. Yeah, you like Chinese?
Yeah?
Good. You can order. I've listened to your uninformed, ignorant opinions for the last 15 hours. Janet, shut up and let it rest. Why'd I have to bring you? Don't be ridiculous. Just keep your mouth shut and maybe you'll learn something. I didn't request you, remember? You were given to me. Are you gonna stay in there and pout or come with me to the police station? And I apologize for my assistant's behavior.
So didn't like that. But I guess what I'm saying what I'm saying is I don't like where he just goes ahead with being part of this arena fight.
I mean, not even
it doesn't really
like,
make much sense to me.
So we know his brother orchestrated the stealing of the sword, but I watched this movie recently, right? As did you. And I can't tell you still, after having just watched the movie, if like it's just happenstance that he ends up at this tournament that his brother's part of after that, or if his brother orchestrated that. I don't really know. I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure the movie knows either. So that's and like you said, you won't rewrite the movie. Hey, don't worry, I will. Why?
Somehow I knew deep inside.
Wouldn't the obvious answer to this, because you just said there's like an easy, there's got to be a way to make this like this sibling rivalry more compelling.
Yeah.
How do they miss having Dacascos, having Kenjiro, the evil brother, kill the dad? Right? Like, shouldn't he have killed the dad recently? And so Bradley is now looking for revenge, and then that makes the end all more compelling. Where he's like, he doesn't want to kill his brother, he wants to forgive him. But imagine if the extra drama on that was that he's like, I'm trying to forgive you, even though you killed our father, but I still see I understand why you felt that way. But like that would, I'm like, obviously that's a better story than canon has the ability to do. But that would be like actual drama for this.
And I guess maybe he still has good inside of him, right? That he wants his dad to love him. But then he, at the end he still says he's gonna go kill his dad. So
yeah, he does. He says when he says that, you're just like, well, why didn't you already do it? Like, why like what's the point of saying you're gonna do it? Yeah. because I get that he joined Yakuza, and obviously Yakuza are the mafia, so we understand he's the villain. But like in this movie, all he's done is stolen the sword. I don't feel he doesn't come across as like the most compelling evil villain, even though Dacascos is trying really hard by, as I said, like overacting and doing like a kind of mustache twirling, fun bad guy. But at a script level, he stole a sword. That's all. Yeah.
I know we're shitting on the post-production of this a lot and the editing choices and the scrambled mess, but you know what? I also got to say Sam Furstenberg seems to have given up on this production because the visuals of it are bad. And
so I mentioned how I think Furstenberg actually has some style that's evident in his other movies, but yeah, I mean, it's not here. No, it's
not here. This is like pure work from hire. Like so much so that even when he says that the filming and editing was like the filming he was doing, but then the editing was like stripped away, but he was busy doing other things. Like he doesn't seem to really care that they were fucking around until he saw it. But the visuals of it and like the fight scenes and the choreography suck. The arena fights, the Bloodsport stuff looks like bad 90s TV. And I guess technically that is kind of what this is, but it does look like
there was like that live action Mortal Kombat TV show that nobody remembers.
Yes,
but like
with Jamie Presley.
It looks like that. Yeah.
The only reason to watch, but there's like not a ton of coverage. There's like similar angles of like a camera that's like obviously on a track that's just going back and forth. There's pure shot reverse shot. The set is just very cheap, and the lighting is poor. Like there's no style to it, and it feels very much like we filmed this in our basement,
There's also one of my favorite things in bad movies. I was thinking there's like an infamous moment of this in a great Mystery Science Theater episode with the movie Space Mutiny, but this movie does it too, where a character dies and then you see that character later. There's one of the fighters. I don't know if you even picked up on this, but it's like the Conan fighter. He gets killed, and then like 2 minutes later, we see all the fighters back in their little like training area, and he's just in the background. I'm like, oh, okay, he's okay.
Okay,
now that's obviously not in Furstenberg. That has to do more with like obviously the whatever haphazard editing happened afterwards. But
sure,
yeah.
Okay, reveal to me. Did you watch this movie twice?
Okay, the answer to that is sort of. As I said,
it can never just be yes or no, eh?
Well, like this is what I said. I basically did what I predicted I would do last time.
Yes,
I put on the director's cut, and I kind of got the vibe of like the changes he made, and then I was like, I don't really need to sit through this twice, so I kind of just had it on and was doing totally other stuff, and just kind of kept checking to see is this still what it seems like, and it is, and like, so the only thing I could say is, to your point about how that the beginning is so haphazard, now understanding what Furstenberg was talking about, it was that, as he said, so the movie starts with the dream sequence where his brother comes to him in a dream, and then he wakes up in his apartment and those gangsters come in, and you're like just thrown into like, what's happening? Who's this guy? Why are these people attacking him? And then the movie kind of goes in the regular order. But every sequence going back to him as a kid, being shown like him training with the dad and like the bad relationship with the brother, those are all like flashbacks that are revealed throughout the movie. So that works slightly better, I guess. Sure. Not to a point of like saving the movie. It is also true, it's cool that Furstenberg got to go back and like make a version that he's more happy with. You always want a version out that the filmmaker can be proud of and that they want. At the same time, that like he talks about how this movie was essentially taken away from him and recut. It's not like this it's not like him and this filmmaker helped him do it. We're able to go into the vaults and find all the old original footage, so they're only working with the movie we have. So all they've done is they've recut the movie that you and I have watched and just reshuffled those scenes. And then to kind of make up for that, like at the beginning when they do the dream sequence, they put this like really stupid like color filter effect on it that looks too modern, so it doesn't like vibe with the movie. And then they like add in like really colorful like on-screen text whenever they go to like a new country and stuff. So it's just like small changes like that. But yeah, the story just goes in like a slightly different order in terms of like having some of having some of the early stuff doled out as flashbacks. But every problem we have with the movie is still entirely there. It doesn't fix the movie. It just, to his point, creates a little bit more of a mystery at the beginning of what's going on with him and this guy, but it doesn't that doesn't really matter. And I'm not even really sure I agree with Furstenberg when he says that, like, well, you know, martial arts movies work better when there's like a mystery like that. Because I'm just thinking, like, well, I mean, your other movies, like the American Ninja movies, were told in chronological order. You know, I think most movies are told in chronological order. It's not like, oh yes, we're just expect to have this told out as a mystery. So that's not really the issue here. You know.
Yeah.
If someone really wants to watch this movie for the first time and they're like, hey, should I watch the original version or the Furstenberg version? My answer to that is like, dealer's choice, buddy. It doesn't really matter. You're going to get the same movie. You're just going to get a slightly different order of scenes.
Well, that's good to know, because I obviously I was, you know, breaking balls, but I was genuinely curious if I had missed out on something that was even marginally better. But you're saying it's like whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I imagine maybe if they'd been able to get all the footage, you know, and actually do something with it, maybe it'd be a little bit more interesting. But ultimately, you're just watching what is essentially like a student experiment to say, hey, if we take this movie, you know, like remember back in the day, certain DVDs would come. They used to do this on Laserdisc too, where they would give you like one scene that you could re-edit to show like how editing works. That's what this feels like. You know, it's like, what happens if I put this scene here instead of here? You know, that's all it really is. Yeah.
I got a question for you regarding David Bradley. Not the star of
Not Walter Frey. Yes.
Not Walter Frey. But this guy stopped acting in 1997. Okay, so only 5 years after this movie's released, and he went on to make Cyborg Cop, which became a franchise, and you know, he had a few other starring roles in, you know, DTV stuff. I don't think he's like very good in this. But I gotta ask you, is like, did he stop by choice? Because he looks the part. He's ripped. He's obviously very accomplished in his craft and skills as a martial artist, but you know, by 1997 he does not do anything else. Is this by his choice? Is it his doing? Does he move on? Does he become a cashier? Like, what happened?
It definitely sounds like he stopped by choice. Maybe now is a great time to defer to our buddy Brian Krysopowicz.
Look at this. Well, we are good at this.
He was our guest in the first episode, and I reached out to him to ask him if he had any thoughts on this one or on David Bradley. And he said he admitted he hasn't seen this movie in a long time, so he didn't really have anything to say about it. But he did say, and I will just read verbatim now. As for David Bradley, he was a fascinating guy in the direct-to-video action movie space. He was making stuff throughout the 90s, including the terrific Cyborg Cop movies with Sam Furstenberg. I know that there were some people who years later thought it was funny that Bradley played a guy named Jack Ryan in both Cyborg Cop movies. He also made a great prison set action movie called Hard Justice. That movie came out and was sort of inspired by the John Woo movies that were just becoming a big deal in American pop culture. Bradley was all over both the video store and cable TV. Hard Justice had its debut on either HBO or Cinemax. I want to say HBO because it could have been part of the old HBO programming block. Bradley was probably never going to move back into theatrical features. He was likely destined to remain in the DTV realm, and if he had stuck around into the early 2000s, he would have likely remained a star just like Don the Dragon Wilson and Olivier Grunner. Heck, he'd probably still be a star today. But after 1997, the guy just disappeared, and no one seems to know why he got out of the business. He did sort of resurface at some point in the 2000s and is on Facebook, as far as I know. I think he became a country music musician or something. I know of at least one entertainment journalist that tried to get an interview with him, but he was always rebuffed. And that's a shame, because I think the guy could have been a reliable star in the early 2000s and would still be a DTV star right now. So that's what Brian had to say, and that pretty much tracks with what I found when I watched those American Ninja movies. Like I said, I kind of had the same thought where, like, just like Dudikoff. Remember I said how if you follow Dudikoff, you know, past those movies we talked about, he incrementally gets better. What I thought about David Bradley is kind of the same thing, where when he was introduced in American Ninja 3, I was like, oh my God, this guy makes Dudikoff look like really charismatic, you know? But then I just mentioned that he's actually really good in American Ninja 5. And I was like, oh, I actually kind of like this guy. And I remember watching, I have seen the Cyborg Cop movies, and they're like good schlock, you know, they're fun schlock. Sure. And he's kind of likable in those. So I'm kind of with Brian, and like, I kind of like David Bradley. I think he got a little better as he went along. This movie is not, I already said that this movie is not a sign of his talents by just asking him to be so like one note and flat. And he's definitely got the martial arts chops. But especially after I watched American Ninja 5, I did the same thing where I was like, well, what happened to this guy? Because, you know, Dudikoff is still all over the place. You can find him doing conventions and interviews on YouTube all the time. So it's like, I want to hear from this guy. I want to hear what David Bradley has to say about, like, taking over and, like, you know, the beef with Dudikoff, making part 4 and everything. And I just couldn't find anything. And I saw the same thing where, like, the action movie heads that I keep referencing in this series, we all like really want David Bradley to like kind of come out and do like some kind of like career retrospective interview or something, and he just like will not. He, like I said, he has apparently, a few years ago, he did engage with some fans on Facebook a little bit. But yeah, he just got out of the scene. He made his movies and he decided to be done. And I heard the same thing where he just maybe he got into music. I think that's actually what Sam Furstenberg said. Furstenberg has said in interviews that he just like ended up being like a musician and doing like bar bands and stuff like that. But yeah, he just walked away from it. And I think that is too bad, because I do agree that I think this movie is not a great example of it, but he did have a presence. He, like you said, he has the look, he had the skills. I'm totally with Brian in that he never would have been a huge star, but he was like perfect for this DTV market. Like he was just what this world needed. Yeah.
Well, that's great, man. Brian, hey, he's just a wealth of knowledge here. And that, if he couldn't really find much on it, and what he did find, Facebook and like rumblings of his country music, second half of his life, that's probably it. Brian, when he I don't know him well, but after our limited engagements here, he does the work.
I always say, like, more power to those people, though, that have their little moment in the sun. And, hell, before this, Bradley was working as a car salesman before he got the American Ninja 3 part, and, as a car salesman that had a martial arts background, so he got brought in for that. And then, as you said, he had, like, a little 10-year run there where he got to make a lot of DTV movies, work with some pretty cool stars, got to go all over the world, make movies in different countries. And then it seems like by his own volition, he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm done. And it's like... That's pretty. He's like 70. He's 74 now. I don't know what he's up to, but it must be pretty cool to be 74 and think back to there was a time where for like a brief moment I got to travel the world, make all these movies, meet all these cool people. I'm sure he's got wild stories to tell, and as long as he's happy, good on him. I do wish he'd stay in the scene a little bit longer, but hey, maybe he saw the writing on the wall too, as far in terms of like the DTV market and everything where it was going.
Right now, he's on his rocking chair by his fireplace and his glass of whiskey, a samurai sword right next to him, and all he's thinking and reminiscing about is screaming at Valerie Trapp in
What if he's 74, this is a perfect age. What if he comes out of retirement now and they cast him to play the part that the other David Bradley played in the Harry Potter TV show, since they're just basically making the same shit again.
I was thinking American Senior Eye.
Yeah, okay.
All right, I'm fired.
I know Dudikoff is trying to get an American Ninja 6 made, and it would be interesting to see would he reach out to David Bradley and say, "Hey, sorry about that last one. Maybe this is the one where we could actually be together." Probably not, but.
Real quick, I did mention Valerie Trapp's name just now. She plays Janet Ward, the reporter that gets kidnapped, or the photographer who gets kidnapped and gets yelled at the whole movie. But I'm looking at her credits. She did not work much either. She did play. This is a. Don't you dare. A few uncredited roles, which is funny, but she did play Woman with a Baby in the 1999 movie Stigmata. And the only reason I bring that up is Stigmata, the trailer for that movie, has always terrified me.
Okay.
I don't like the scene when she's like with her eyes rolled back or whatever, and she's like by the chalkboard, if I remember correctly.
So did you avoid the movie because of the trailer? Or?
I have never seen the movie. I've never seen Stigmata. Okay. Freaks me out. I know. That's it.
If I could highlight, unless you have more to say about Valerie Trapp,
no, that was it. That was it.
I mean, she's cute. That's why she's in the movie.
Yep.
If I could highlight one other cast member, I only want to do so because I mentioned earlier that I would talk about the other connection between this and American Ninja and how craven this movie is in terms of it's like trying to like recapture that. So as you mentioned at the beginning of this movie, again, and this is a scene that's not in the cut, the Furstenberg cut I watched, but we see like him as Andrew as a baby in a plane, and the plane crashes and his parents die, and we learn that he was found by this samurai who raised him. That samurai who raised him is played by John Fujioka. So he plays Tatsuya Asanga in this, the samurai that finds a white baby and raises him to be a samurai. Which is interesting because I will tell you about another movie John Fujioka is in. It is called American Ninja, where he plays a Japanese soldier who finds a white baby and raises him to be a ninja. And that is the origin of Joe in American Ninja. So same actor, same character, same idea. This is even more cut and paste than you realize. Yeah.
So that probably leads to the question, did we think that there should have been an American Samurai 2?
I'm going to take a pass on that.
Yeah, I think it's a resounding no. I mean, we have American Ninja at home, which is that's
5 of them.
over. Yeah, and like you said, trying to get a 6th one.
Yeah.
Well, what did you tell me? You read an interview or you watched a clip of Dudikoff? What did he say?
This is so weird. So this was very strange. I watched an interview from last year with Dudikoff, where he talked about how he's trying to get an American Ninja 6 made. And they keep saying that. And he's like, I'm trying to do American Ninja 6. Like, I want to make an American Ninja 6. And then about like 5 minutes later in the interview, the interviewer goes, did you know they made an American Ninja 5? And Dudikoff is like, what? No. And he's like, yeah, no, it's really strange. Because then he tells the story I did. He's like, yeah, it was a different movie, but they called it American Ninja 5. And Dudukoff's like, oh, I didn't even know about that. And I'm just thinking, like, what? Like, you must know in your head that there was an American Ninja 5 if you were trying to make American Ninja 6, and that is what you were referring to it. It was just very, very bizarre. But you know what?
Wow.
Guy probably got kicked in his head a lot while making these
I was
movies.
about to say
So,
brain damage.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sad. I'm looking at my notes. We covered really everything here. Canon. When does Canon like really die? What do you know that? Like, do you know like the what's the time of death?
Well, as I said, I think their last like official movie is Hellbound, the like supernatural Chuck Norris thriller. Okay. Let's see, whenever that was released would be 1994.
So just 2 years later. Okay.
Yeah. Then the United States Bankruptcy Court set a deadline of January 11th, 1995 for the creditors of Canon Pictures to submit their claim and evidence of debt. But instead, the entire library went up for sale in 1997. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Golan did in 2001, and I believe this is something that's covered a little bit more in the Go-Go Boys documentary. Golan in 2001 did start a company called New Canon, where I think they made a couple of things, including a movie that I imagine is probably very sensitive and not at all problematic called Oy Vey, My Son is Gay, which is scripted. Coming soon on Failure Franchise? I don't know.
I was about to ask. I actually hope so now.
But as it is, true to form, he announced a bunch of movies that he was planning to do, including movies with Dudikoff and Mickey Rourke and Bruce Willis. A movie called The Golem with Al Pacino and Natasha Kinski. He was developing all these movies. Another Alan Quartermain movie. Cannon had made 2 of those before with Richard Chamberlain, Sharon Stone. He said he was going to bring all these franchises back, and then he passed away before any of them could be produced. And who knows if he even would have got them produced if he hadn't, but he was still trying at the end, to his credit. The only other thing I was going to mention really quickly, and it's just a total afterthought at this point, but if anyone does go on to watch American Samurai, if we've somehow convinced you to watch this movie, there's a character we keep talking about how it's like just clearly like a Bloodsport clone, which just makes sense, right? Because Bloodsport is still like in the ether at this time. In Bloodsport, of course, Van Damme has that like buddy who's played by I can't remember the actor's name, but he's Ogre from the Revenge of the Nerds movies, and he's like he's the big like beefy white guy that's his buddy. They give him there's a version of that in this where there's like a cowboy guy that David Bradley befriends and like joins the tournament. Anytime that guy's on screen, just close your eyes, and it's kind of fascinating. He sounds exactly like Randy Quaid. He's just got it's like I wonder if Randy Quaid did the ADR for this guy. That's how much he sounds like him.
Hey, check out that pirate. Blind on one side. I hope I draw him.
You better hope you don't.
What?
That handicap could be his advantage.
Well, how's that?
Well, it causes your opponent to make assumptions, like the one you just made.
Yeah, the shitter was full.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to just quickly say, as a if we want to have like a nice,
I love one last thing.
Just because this is not even an addendum for American. This isn't even an addendum for American Samurai. Sure. Instead, going back to a previous episode, but it is Furstenberg related, and going back to our thoughts on Steve James. We talked about how Steve James never got to be the lead; he was always the sidekick. In 1989, Sam Furstenberg did direct a movie called Riverbend. It's an independent action drama starring Steve James that is actually about 3 African-American soldiers in the segregated South during the Civil Rights era that goes into it becomes like a Vietnam movie, I believe. The film follows 3 black Vietnam soldiers who, after escaping a corrupt court-martial, arrive in a small Georgia town terrorized by a racist sheriff, and lead the black residents in an armed uprising for justice and self-determination. That movie kind of like it did come out, but I think it was. I'm not sure if it was straight to video or it just has a minor theatrical release, but it's definitely been forgotten to time. However, it has just been restored, and Furstenberg, who's still around, did supervise that. It got a 6K restoration. Crazy. Not even 4K.
Wow.
They went 6K on this
Not
movie.
even James Cameron can get that.
Yeah. And it got some theatrical showings last year, and it is being prepped for a Blu-ray release now. So it is kind of cool that it's still interesting that this era, right? All these these little cool action movies of this time are being rediscovered today. But also it's kind of cool that, as we said, Steve James never really had his moment in the sun. Well, here we finally get a Furstenberg movie starring Steve James that is going to get a Blu-ray release later this year. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's a great segue to even Sam Furstenberg talking about these types of movies.
Yeah.
In this interview you sent me, where he's kind of baffled by the renewed interest and fascination with these Cannon films in the 80s and 90s. He calls it a total mystery. It's beyond my understanding. I'm totally amazed. I find it hilarious that he's almost like, you guys like these pieces of shit? But he does say, which I think he's right. He says, I am totally amazed at what is happening and cannot explain it, except for maybe the fact that these movies have lost quality of being made in a straightforward fashion. He basically talks about how modern films have digital gimmicks and different effects and are screwed around in post, which is kind of ironic that he says it here. But he says what you see on screen with these types of Cannon films, these action films, is what really happened on the set. Every piece of action was physically performed and executed for real, and the viewer can sense it. Yeah, we saw that dummy of that little kid fall off that roof of that house. Okay, Sam? Yes, that happened. It has a different feel from the newly made movies, and the audience appreciates it. So I actually think he's dead on. I think there is a growing sense of maybe nostalgia for a simpler time. To put it
No, that's I think we responded to that in not this movie, but all previous 3 movies, right? Is that there was just some the practical effects and the lack of cynicism and irony in those movies too. That's what we said makes particularly Invasion USA and even more so Cobra work, is that you could look at those and they seem like parody today, but the great thing is those weren't made as parodies. Those movies were taking themselves so seriously, and it's that lack of self-mocking or self-irony that actually makes them so much more entertaining.
The wink action we talk about,
yes,
in modern day filmmaking, there is no sense of wink action in these movies.
No. So you have maybe you don't always have the best actors, but you do have talented, athletes and talented action performers, going to interesting looking locations, really going, not shooting in volumes, right? Really going to these exotic countries and cool locales and doing practical stunts and blowing up cars and nearly killing stuntmen. And it's a blast to watch. And if anything, this series has definitely made me want to sit down and watch even more Cannon films, so.
I'm so glad you said that, because before we wrap up and tell you what's coming next on Failure to Franchise in our next brand new theme month, I am putting 3 films on my queue. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when I say that on the podcast, I commit. You know that?
Yeah.
I commit. I watch it, and I'll tell you later. Riverbend just got added. Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna watch that. I think I might wait for it to be released in a in a fashion that I can watch it with the the new restoration.
Yeah.
But Riverbend will be on there. Brian, I think Brian said the Delta Force or Delta Force 1, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that one for sure. I'm not going to watch the rest, but I'll watch Delta Force 1. I can promise you that. And the other one was that train movie. What is that?
Oh, Runaway Train.
Runaway Train. I am absolutely going to watch that one.
Yeah, Runaway Train rules. Yeah.
There was clips of that in that Electric Boogaloo, and I was like, this is my kind of movie. So, those 3, I promise you, I will get to.
If I could throw one more onto the pile,
sure.
If and this one is schlock, right? But this is the best, highest level of schlock, and they touch on this one in here too. But I feel like everyone in their life at some point should see Ninja 3: The Domination. And no, you do not need to see the previous two. In fact, it is a trilogy where none of them are connected, and Ninja 3 is the only one that has a number in the title. So there was Enter the Ninja, then Revenge of the Ninja, and then Ninja 3: The Domination. No connection between the three of them, but Ninja 3: The Domination is one of the all-time great bad movies. So I would throw that one in. There's a sex scene in that movie that you will never forget. I'm just going to say that.
I was about to say, I'm pretty sure this one has an abundance of nudity.
I can't remember if it's got an abundance of nudity, but it's definitely got an abundance of like, what the fuck am I watching? So it's another one that stars Lucinda Dickey, who I mentioned before as being like, she was the one who made 3 movies for Canon that year. Yeah. And I love her.
Okay. I'll add it. Yeah. Okay. 4. I'm promising right now 4. Not tomorrow, but in the
and of course you will also watch the Sam Furstenberg cut of American Samurai. So
that I can promise you will never even anyway. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Misfired Cannons. What a great theme. This was all, you know what? I got to give props. This was all you're doing. Okay. Yeah. So I trust you along our failure to franchise journey. And when you threw this in here, I was like, I'll go with God here. And I'm glad we did. I think we did such a great, not to, pat ourselves on the back and self-flagellate here, but I think we actually did a pretty bang-up job with these 4 episodes to complete the arc that was this studio. So
yeah. And of course, big thanks to Brian for helping us kick that off too.
Oh, for sure.
With all of his knowledge in the first episode. So
I will say I got some recent praise for that episode with Brian. So if he's listening, which I think he is, you got some more praise. As if you fucking need any more, okay?
we'll try to have Brian back at some point too. I wouldn't even say try. We will have Brian back at some point.
Absolutely.
So,
Okay. We roll along.
Yeah, I mean, you just read that quote from Sam Furstenberg about how, the secret sauce for why everyone loves these Canon movies is how simple they are and how they're not just full of, effects, and they're not, like I said, they're not just like, look, they're original ideas and they're not going back on anything. So anyways, let's talk about our next theme.
It's funny too, because now putting it together in the Cobra episode, we talked about a certain person that has much tie to this franchise, and also Stallone aping certain posters from it. So we're going into May, and we're calling this No Fate But What We Make. Okay. Which I think is a stroke of genius. I came up with it probably 3 years ago. It's been sitting in our app here in our notes. But yes, No Fate But What We Make. May 5th, we're looking at Terminator Salvation from 2009. And guess what, listeners? You will hear an abundance of the Christian Bale freakout. Okay.
I was going to say, a movie thankfully has no interesting behind-the-scenes stuff to talk about.
Oh my God, I cannot wait. And then May 19th, Terminator Genesis from 2015.
Guess what? First time watch for me.
Very cool. Okay,
I'm looking at Genesis. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. You might be thinking, hey, where's that other Terminator movie, that Dark Fate movie?
I was thinking it.
Yeah, so. I know. And then I told you, stop thinking about it, because I've seen that movie twice now. And I'm not watching it again.
At least not yet. We need more distance from it.
Yes, I do. So, No Fate, But What We Make, May 5th, Terminator Salvation. May 19th, Terminator Genesis. Those, I think, are going to be very, very fun episodes. So tune in. And you can do that by following at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2 FPod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. Star rating would be fantastic on your podcast app, whatever you're listening to. And then join the tribe and hit that subscribe. I was about to say a hard out of like, let's go home. Like this movie, how it just ends. I know you love an ending that just ends. This one has maybe an all-timer.
Yeah, I mean, I love it because it's like so entertaining. This one I just loved it because it felt like a mercy killing. It's just like let's just fucking get. You want to get out of here? We want to get out of here. Let's just be done with it.